I'm Kreskin. Of course, you know me as the Amazing Kreskin. And if you've read my thoughts, you know I'm going to be on with Dov Baron. And boy, we're going to have a fascinating session, including some of the unsealed messages of the inner mind.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron, founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you in tapping into your deep greatness so that you can reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. Today's show is a special episode. You're going to get to eavesdropping on a conversation I get to have with a man who in many ways was kind of a catalyst to me being absolutely fascinated with the mind. So stay tuned. Remember, you can chat about this show or any of our episodes by going to our Facebook page, Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast on Facebook. Just search it out and go in there. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. And remember, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you turn into podcasts. And we always need your help in staying relevant. So please get yourself over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. When you do, go back to that Facebook page, Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty, and tell us, and maybe we'll give you a shout out right here on the air. As I said, you can find us on traditional radio stations across the United States, all the way from Tampa, Florida to Wisconsin. Also, look out for us on Roku TV, where there is over 100,000 subscribers. And if you are a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500's listeners, and with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every single show. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. Remember, you can find us on Google Home and Alexa by simply saying play Dov Baron podcast. So thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, someone in the C-suite, a sales leader, an entrepreneur, a leader in any capacity, you probably know that we can gather all the facts and then look back and realize that we missed so much that was right in front of us. Sometimes we're blind to the very things that are right under our nose. How can we learn to see what we're blind to? And how can we use that to make us better leaders? Well, stay tuned, because you're about to find out on this particular episode. We're about to reveal a man whose showman flair, his comedic wit, and capacity to be a bona fide mentalist or, quote, thought leader is the Amazing Kreskin. Now, when I was a kid in my teens, I would be glued to the TV when the Amazing Kreskin would come on. This man has been, for more than 6 decades, he's dramatized the facets of the human mind. He is the author of, I believe, 9 books. He has a degree in psychology, and for over 6 decades, his name has become an integral part of pop culture throughout the world. At 83 years of age, Kreskin shows no signs of slowing down. He continues to perform his legendary live shows in front of packed audiences around the world, playing over 200 gigs a year. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and help me to welcome the Amazing Kreskin.
Hello there. How are you?
I'm good, sir. It's good to have you here.
I have to tell you, I find you, and I've been interviewed by thousands of people through the year. I'm very tuned into people's voices. I have a problem, which is also an advantage. I have an extraordinary sense of hearing, and I can, on a telephone within about, and I don't mean to be bragging when I say this, within 3 or 4 minutes, tell the mood of a person. I've been called on 86 crime cases in my life, but I have to tell you, you have an extraordinarily dynamic voice. And
Thank you, sir.
I mean that very, very seriously. By the way, God, if I used some hypnotic techniques, I'd have them introduce me to every program around the world. Folks, you listen to me.
That's very kind. That's very kind, sir.
You
Now,
know,
so like I said, in the 80s, I watched you on TV. I was amazed at the work you were doing. You also have done some predictions, so people might think you're a psychic or a hypnotist, but in fact, you are a mentalist. Please tell our audience who may be not familiar with that term, in the simplest possible way, what is a mentalist?
Well, it's the way I have to do. By the way, when we're talking about traveling and so forth, 2.5 years ago, the airline industry announced I've flown, as of then, 3.5 million miles. And
wow!
I just was on one of the I won't mention the airline, but the last one I was on, they called me to the cockpit. You can't sit in the cockpit anymore. I used to always sit with the pilots. And the two pilots with this major airline said, Kreskin, the two of us combined haven't flown that many miles. So you're going to ask me later on, where do I want to go? Where would I like to fly to on a vacation-free trip? I'd like to go in a covered wagon, a canoe, something that just is not
something that's far simpler.
But you asked a very significant question. I don't claim to have psychic abilities in the sense that, yes, I've been involved in 86 crime cases. Only about a third was I've been help. But no, it's not that someone was giving me an object and said, what kind of vibrations you're getting and so forth. I work with people's thoughts. A perfect example is the Riviera in Vegas, and I was there for a number of months. During one of my audience readings, which you've seen me do on television, I said, someone's thinking of these two names. Person stood up, an elderly gentleman, very distinguished looking, and I said, how do you know these people? He says, Kreskin, they're not friends of ours. We don't live here in Vegas. I forget what part of the country he's from. They're our dogs. We love them dearly. And I said, I love animals very dearly myself. Didn't you say to your wife, I wonder if you could tell me my Army number? And I wish we had a camera. He's standing at it, he slams his fist down and said, yeah, but that was at another hotel 2 hours ago and we were sitting and eating. I said, do you know your Army number? Well, all of you listening in Canada, the United States, wherever you are, no one ever forgets their Army serial number, but they never talk about it. I said, did you ever tell your wife? He says, no, I had no reason to talk about it. I said, concentrate. And I gave him every single digit of his Army number in order. He was in World War II, but I couldn't have done it unless he thought about it. Yes, I predicted the last 4 elections. I predicted a couple of Super Bowls. But you know what? I have a claim. I know very little about almost anything and next to nothing about everything else. I pick up feelings of what's going on, or even when it came to elections, because I'm working with audiences on time and time again. All you have to do, and all right, I'm going to give something away in my performance in the maybe the beginning when I came with you and say, I know how you feel about the next election. Let's not go into that. I've always made this claim. I have nothing against politicians. I just wish that most of them had been on the Titanic. But anyway, let's say something about the election. Everybody starts thinking who they're going to go for and so forth. And I get a pretty good sense with that audience of who the majority are going to vote for. So it's not that I'm a fortune teller.
No, but let's just define so that people can grasp, because we get, okay, you said you're not a fortune teller, but these are things that people perceive as being psychic or fortune telling. Explain to the audience as briefly as you can what a mentalist actually is.
For myself, a person has to concentrate. They have to concentrate. Otherwise, I can't get anything. If you came in and someone were drinking heavily, I don't, and they couldn't focus on something, so I had them stand up and say, well, think of where you live, your address. I couldn't get it. It would all get kind of muddled because they have to literally focus. And the real, what has become, as one drama critic said in reviewing, he says, before I reviewed his show, I saw 2 or 3 nights, it was in Philadelphia, I saw him in a row. He says, watching this scene is like watching a mystery story. And I reviewed mysteries all my life. In all my performances, almost all of them, there's a critical point where we gather from the audience 5 or 6 people that I've never met. And to wrap it up real quick, I hand them my check. I'm escorted from the theater by myself, by two of the committee members and ushers. If it's in a theater, we go outdoors. The last year at the Toronto State Fair, because we had a few thousand in the audience that was outdoors, they had a trailer next to the stage. And they took me in the trailer. The windows were closed and what have you, and I was guarded. While I'm out of the premises, my check is hidden anywhere in the entire theater auditorium or outdoor stadium, 10,000, anywhere in the stadium of people. When it's hidden, they come and get me, bring me to the stage, into the theater. And I say to the committee, I don't want you to talk to me. I'm not going to ask you any questions. One of you, I want you to concentrate on where you've hidden it. If I don't find my fee, I forfeit the entire fee. It goes back to the company that booked me.
Mm-hmm.
The program is for free. And people have said, have I ever failed? Yes, I have failed. As of this, some months ago, 11 times out of 6,000. But the most famous was New Zealand, because it was opening and I love the country. And I failed in this large theater, and they had a press conference the next day, not because I failed, because the night before when I failed, I lost in one night $51,000.
Wow.
And the places it's been hidden, one dramatic incident, and universities are crazy. You can imagine how creative universities are. When I come back, oh, you're going to do the test. Well, there's one university in the Midwest. I come back into a gymnasium. It's about 8,000 people. They've hidden it. And the committee's on. They had to build a platform at the other end of the gym because it wasn't a theater. So anyway, the bottom line is I'm walking through the theater. It's very hard to, because the floor has a covering on it, and people are sitting in chairs there, and they're sitting in bleachers. And they come up to this distinguished man. I said, would you stand up, sir? Would you open your mouth? Well, I felt like a fool. There was no check. I said, sir, I'm sorry. I don't mean to embarrass you. So I walked away back to the stage. I said to the committee, you've got to talk to me mentally. Tell me in your mind the direction to go. And I go back. I come back to the same person. I said, sir, I embarrass you. In the next 2 minutes, sit down. And my fee ended. Would you open your mouth again? I looked at him. I said, does this have to do with the roof of your mouth? Darby opened his mouth, reached in his mouth, and took out his upper plates and handed me my check.
He was hiding the check under his dentures. That's fantastic.
So you can imagine. So all over the world.
That's pretty creative. That's a pretty creative way to hide them.
I should tell you this to your viewers, because next theater performance I'm doing, they're going to get more diabolical because of what I've just told you.
Oh, sure. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, you've done a lot of things, and like you said, you've helped with legal situations, with police, etc. We've all seen movies where people cheat polygraphs and
Oh, yes.
certain legal situations going on right now around polygraphs and all the rest of it. You've worked for a number of years with a polygraph expert. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, he's no longer with us, but I knew him very closely for a number of years. I just want to say something, and it's not judging two people today, Kavanaugh or
Ford.
We're not judging, but it's also evaluating the situation. Let me just say this: someone is going to defend themselves by turning to a polygraph test. It gives me a concerned alert, because every psychologist, or my degree's in psychology, I don't brag about it, but every psychologists know that one of the reasons the polygraph test is not acceptable in courts here, and I don't know if it's true in Canada, but the United States.
It's true in Canada. It's not acceptable in court.
Because of a number of things. You can lie and get away with lying, and I can train, and this is no mystical thing, I'm not some miracle, I can train most of you to beat the polygraph test. Now let me tell you a very dramatic scenario. It's going to be hard for me to talk about this. You'll realize why. I've been asked I was interviewed in London about hypnosis on the polygraph test, and it's hard to talk about this incident. I was calling on a case by a family, and this gentleman, a tremendous amount of jewelry was lost in Essex County, New Jersey, in an elderly folks' home. And the children called and said, Kreskin, can you come in? We want to talk to you about this. And I talked to the police, and they said, don't bother. I said, what do you mean? They said, well, we know who did it. I said, oh, I've worked with law enforcement. They said, we understand, but we know. I said, what do you mean? We gave him a polygraph test, and he failed. I said, I don't think I know the person who is it. They mentioned the person. I said, he's innocent. They said, Kreskin, no, he isn't. He failed the test. A month or two later, I'm invited to the home in which the jewelry was stolen. And there's like 60 people there. No, I'm not going to go and ask people, did you steal this? Did you steal this?
No, of course not.
Well, can you walk around and get a feel? This is the family that called me. And some of them knew me for certain reasons. And I would talk to people and say, isn't it a shame about the jewelry that was gone? And we talk about other things. And I visited them for 40, 50, for almost a whole evening, by the way. Now I leave, and the two detectives are out there. I said, what are you gentlemen doing here? They said, Kreskin, he didn't show up. I said, yes. I said, I don't get a feeling, and I don't, this is not a judgment. I don't feel there's anyone there suspicious. They said, of course not. He did it. Well, I got an argument with them, and I don't argue. I don't argue like Dr. Fish. I said, he's innocent. And that was the end of that. We didn't see each other. He wasn't charged because the only evidence was failing something like this. I was very deeply upset because he's one of the 5 closest friends of my life. He's a dentist, very close. He's gone now. When he's gone, whoever learned that they found he stole it, they I'm sure considered him guilty, except a couple of years ago, and I just talked to the family 3 days ago, the house was being sold because the 2 grandparents had died separately. They'd become filled with Alzheimer's, but they had died. And they called me on the phone and said, Kreskin, guess what? We climbed up on some piece that was built into one of the rooms. There was all the jewelry. Obviously, one of the 2 parents with Alzheimer's had put it there and forgotten. So the person was innocent, even though he failed the polygraph test. That's one of the reasons why it's not the answer to truth or not. I'm sorry. I had to Now, the other thing I'm asking about, because it's the past 2 days, it's being constantly discussed on the news here in the States because of Kavanaugh and Ford and so forth, is the factor of hypnosis. It's now been learned that a few years before, 4 years earlier, she's a psychologist. She was in a hypnosis conference, and they were all participating as a large group, apparently to relax under better conditions and what have you. And the question is, how legitimate it is. My degree is in psychology, but one of the contributions I'm very, very proud of in my life on the serious side. If anybody said there's some certain things that mean a great deal to me, yes, in the late 1980s, I was tried by a jury. On trial. There's no trial like that in I've had a parliament one day brought my name up. I'll tell you why in a moment. But anyway, he said, if this is all there is to hypnosis, as Kreskin says, forget about a law regarding hypnosis. Let's clean up the streets and what have you. And this was about 5 years ago. I was very pleased they brought my name. But anyway, I was known as a hypnotist, a middle Eastern hypnotist early in my career. I had an office for 8 years with a clinical psychologist, Dr. Hansen, because he said I could help with his patients. The last year with him, I said, Harold, there's something that stinks about this hypnosis. He says, you handle it better than these medical experts. I've seen you even on the stage in matters. I said, something's fishy about this. I can get results with them where they're wide awake. This gentleman who's afraid of crowds and the person who's afraid, I've gone in different, I used to see about 30 of his patients a week. And I said, I want to see what I can do if I didn't put a person into a trance. Well, now it's in medical textbooks. T.X. Barber, a pioneer some years ago, constantly referred to me. I've come to a conclusion that hypnosis does not exist. There is no such thing at all as a hypnotic state. It is all the power of suggestion. I don't mean people who are faking. I mean, suggestion under certain conditions can be so effective, whether you're upset, whether you're in front of a great orator, one of the persons who we don't give credit to, or Esther Brooks in his book Hypnotism in 1944. He was key man at Colgate University, wrote a book called Hypnotism. At that time, he said the most powerful hypnotist he ever saw in his life was Adolf Hitler. Mm-hmm. The incredible thing is there's behind the scenes influence of a hypnotist involving Hitler and that man that they murdered in April of 1933. The problem, the thing is this, it's not that you're in a trance, you're wide awake and conscious at all times. And the reason I went on trial is I'd offered $50,000 to anyone who could prove hypnotic state. I was sued by a hypnotist. He had as a witness a psychiatrist, and I'm not critical of psychiatrists. I just never met more whacked out people in my life. And I have a couple of these friends of mine, psychiatrists, say there's more craziness in this field than we've ever seen, but that's the way the business is. So anyway, I won the trial. That I won't go into detail. A very dramatic scenario. The judge the second day said, "You've wasted $100 and some thousand of Kreskin's money. Get out of here. You haven't proved anything." Since then, I now offer $100,000 to anyone who can prove hypnotic state, provided you can show what can be done without it. The truth of the matter is, as T.X. Barber agreed with me, no test shows a trance. Everything that we do with a person supposedly in a trance, a skillful practitioner can elicit the same response. So some years ago, when NBC banned me and called me, and I did 88 Carson shows, said, "You're going to do this with Johnny?" I said, "Yes." They said, "Kreskin, you're not to do it. It's too dangerous what could happen to him physically." I said, "Okay, you don't argue with NBC or the Pope or the president." 2 days before, I get a call from Johnny. He says, "You're on the show." A couple nights, I said, "Yeah." He said, "They told you not to do this, Kreskin." He was very bitter with NBC because they erased the first year of his show early in television. He says, "We're going to do it anyway." I come on the stage, and there's two men sitting next to Cordova as producer, and Carson nudges my shoulder, telling me that's NBC, but forget it. "Kreskin, you're going to do something with me." The bottom line is he stood there. I started counting, his eyes closed. I said, "Your body's getting rigid. Ed, if Johnny falls, catch him." He said, "You sure as hell we're going to." They knew what I was going to do. He started falling over. I said, "Lift him." We got two chairs. We put his head and feet on his head on one, his feet on the other. There was nothing, this was not a magic act. And there he was, rigid. And his eyes were closed. His body was totally rigid. And the bottom line was, they got in newspapers all over the Western world. I said, "Would you come over here?" She said, "No." She came over, she says, "No, no." She was shaking. And every time I see her, she said, "I thought I'd never be asked on the air again on this show." Ed McMahon says, "Come on over here." And I said, "Sit on him." She says, "Are you out of your mind?" She said, "Sit on him." That was Bette Midler.
Oh, really?
On the middle of him. When we lifted her off, and I lifted Carson, slowly counted back, his eyes open, he said, "I would have thrown it was a baby." It was the power of suggestion.
Sure.
How powerful suggestion can be.
Well, as Richard Bandler said, the problem is not putting people in state, it's getting them out of state.
Are you talking about politicians, or are you talking about...
Well, I mean, this is the point, right? This is the point in leadership. It's one of the things that I talk about in leadership because of my background in the psychology and all the other things that I've studied, is that leadership is first and foremost influence and impact and the depth of the relationships that we create. And so if we're going to do that, we have to understand that in the society we live in, which is a hierarchical society, by the position, the status of being a leader, you have impact. You have the power of influence and impact. And as you said, it's the old school study from the 1970s with the kids who did bad in school and they moved into another school and they told the teachers, these are all exceptional kids, but they're all high energy and you won't be able to manage them. But you should know that they're all potential geniuses. And these kids who were failing miserably went to super A's. Why? It was the power of suggestion, not only on the kids, but on the teachers. And you're absolutely right. And when we look at our own lives, anything I feel inadequate about in my own life was installed in my childhood as a suggestion. And anything I feel magnificent about has either been installed or I've installed it through the power of suggestion.
Also what we don't realize, and something we must realize today, I've been interviewed many, many times There's been books written about in the late 1930s, the War of the Worlds of Orson Welles.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Well, the full story has never been told. Yes, he terrified. And how do I know how that night he was doing the War of the Worlds? By the way, the show was not popular. The show was a show called Edgar Bergen Shot at McCarthy, which was a ventriloquist show on radio. As a little kid, I remember hearing it. Everybody listened to the show. But that night, Edgar Bergen was having as a guest a movie star, but it was an opera singer. And when it was announced that the opera singer was going to be on, it got near to her time, which is not the beginning of the show. People turned to another station, and they turned to CBS, and there was Orson Welles doing the War of the Worlds, Martian's Landing, and so forth. Except that by the time the people turned, it was no longer.
They'd missed the beginning.
And Orson Welles brilliantly decided, and I sat with him many times to discuss this. He did it as a news broadcast. There were news people covering this thing in New Jersey where they were landing and so forth. But that's not simply the power of that. It is the setting that was in. During that period, there was fear that we were going to be attacked by a foreign power.
Of course.
We're getting out that at that point it was Germany because Hitler was building
Yep.
So the setting was, and there were rumors here and there taking place. Consequently, the stage was set for an idea like that to be effective. By the way, your viewers will be and listeners will get a kick out of this because it's not been mentioned in print. I said one night, Orson Welles came to one of my shows in London. He was living there then. I said, Orson, tell me something. We've talked. This is in the evening or the afternoon. Did you have any idea? Didn't you have a suspicion that this was going to happen, that you were going to have this impact? He hemmed and hawed, and a friend of his with him said, come on, tell Kreskin. He says, well, you know, the secretaries, the radio, the news, telephone people called and said, something's got to be done. We're getting calls on the phone constantly. It's Sunday night. So one of the key heads of CBS goes into the studio in New York, in the building, goes upstairs because he's going to have Orson Welles interrupt and say, this is just a play. Except he couldn't open the door. Orson Welles had the door locked until the end of the play.
Fabulous.
A plus.
Fabulous.
But you know, you mentioned something. So in the setting today, and of course, the other factor today is we have beset with us. And I know you're much aware of this because of your knowledge and background and really understanding of the phenomenon of communication. We now have multiple communication that's nonstop.
Mm-hmm.
Internet that's just going right. And the other problem, and I bring this up in seminars because I do seminars for business groups that run about 3.5, 4 hours. And so the other problem is we all know this, and this is mentioned constantly. We're not really listening and paying attention to each other as we once did because we have the instant communication. I mean, there are people who go out to eat with a cell phone on the table, and people will sit and talk on the telephone. And what we're not doing, and I sit with law enforcement groups, and sometimes when I'm doing private sessions with them, we need to, as you well have mentioned in the past, I'm sure in some way or the other, for God's sakes, after a meeting, whether it's with a loved one, someone you're having an affair with, a business person, a challenging thing, stop, get away, and reflect upon what's taken place. Think about it. Sit in the even in the kitchen at night. People are not doing that as much as they once did.
No, we're not as reflective as we once were, and because we're not reflective on situations and circumstances, we are also. This also makes us party to influence and impact that may not be so good. And so, you know, we're seeing what I call now a return to tribal mentality, and the tribes are fractional and getting more fractional. So it was, you know, for a while it was white against people of color or people of color against white. And now it's become, as we've seen with the Kavanaugh Ford, it's become gender. I mean, it's all fractionalizing, and because we're not present with ourselves, it's very easy to be influenced and pulled into a fraction, because the human psychology, part of human beings, is we want to belong. And so if we feel like we're being pushed out of a fraction, we're going to attach ourselves to a fraction. And this, of course, gives birth to what we, as you mentioned, what we've seen in the past, which is the rise of fascism, the rise of extreme thinking and extreme religions, all these kinds of things, instead of a a more universal thinking, a more global thinking, a more compassionate thinking of we are humans and we need to share the planet. We are getting close, very close to the end here, and I don't want to cut you off because you and I can.
I love talking to you.
Thank you, sir.
I find it. You are very refreshing. By the way, folks, all of you listening, and he's not going to erase this. I promise if I'm in person on the air with him, I dare not read his thoughts. I'm only joking. I'm joking. If we can't laugh at ourselves in this day and age, we're in trouble.
No, exactly. So as I said, we're coming close to the very end, and I want to just pull in a couple of things here. First and foremost, I want to thank you for being on the show. But what I want to ask you is this: tell us a guilty pleasure. What is a guilty pleasure of the Amazing Kreskin? Because you do all these gigs every year. You're on shows all the time, being interviewed. But we all need to put our feet up sometime. What's a guilty pleasure for you? One of the
sad things in my life is as I travel, and I don't complain because traveling is part of the business and so forth, is that I don't have the occasions to spend as much time with people I've been very close to. And I mean that as a very, very serious, because we all in life, if you show me someone who has 200 friends on the internet, and I will show you a very lonely person.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
It's a highly personalized experience, and those factors mean a great deal to me. So and yet Bob Hope said to me, he never heard such advice. That was if you really want to tell me what I've said, my advice to people that want to go into the entertainment or public business or show business, if you'd like to know the tip that Hope says is the best, most honest answer he ever heard in his life, it's simply this: if you got talent, if you got a lot on the ball, if you would forget about minimum wage salary, and will work with every opportunity you have. And if you have a great deal of luck with a tremendous amount of talent, you have a minuscule chance of ever making it in show business. And all the people in show business that hear me say that are in it, they say, Kreskin, we haven't made success. We know that's the field, but we love it that much. And Hope said, that's the true person. You're not discouraging anyone. You're telling them the facts, because the person who wants it will still rise and work their life for it.
Of course. So what is your guilty pleasure? I am not letting you off the hook, my friend. That is not happening.
You mean it's something that I feel that I'm guilty of? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's something that like people would not think that you do. Like, so
all right. I have a passion for. I read 4 newspapers a day. I read 4 books a day. I mean, I won't go into that, as Howard Stern said to a Bermuda guy. He says, "Get on this air. I'm going to embarrass you," because it takes me about 15 minutes to read a book. So,
right.
A novel, a technical book is obviously longer. I love to read gossip, and gossip.
Yeah.
Not that I buy it, but I know the story behind gossip column writers and so forth. And I get a kick how they're playing with people's past and present and what have you, because they're really tapping into what people like to do when they're alone, walking down the street in a quiet town and just talking about the person in the house there. I enjoyed that, but I also then later on erased it. Just find it refreshing. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Thank you. That's the first time I ever admitted that. That's oh my God, folks. You gotta guard me when I'm with them.
Well, I want to really thank you for being with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Before we sign off, I would like for you to tell our viewers, our listeners, where they can find out more about you, where they can find out more about your books and all the wonderful resources that you have to offer.
Well, my new book's coming out in a few months. It's my 21st book. My
21st.
You can look at me on Facebook Live, because I once or twice a week I comment, sometimes only 32 seconds. I have to do when I'm on tour, on different things that come up and so forth. And then my website, which is amazingkreskin.com. I appreciate all the commentary, and I will tell you this, I do read every single thing that's sent me. I can't respond all the time, but I do read it.
Fabulous. Well, thank you again, sir.
I want to
It's been
say,
an absolute pleasure.
I will
It's
not-
always fun to meet somebody that I mean, how cool is that? Like I said, I was a kid.
Jesus.
And I got that out of you, which is great.
I got to tell you this, the spirit of broadcasting. I said this all my career. I'm not going to say goodbye. Let's just say to be continued.
Thank you, sir. I hope you'll stay with us to the end as we just sign off here. And I want to thank you, dear listener, for tuning in. And I'm going to really encourage you to get over to amazingkreskin.com. Go have a look at the books and the resources that are there. And please go to the Facebook page, Dov Baron Leadership and Loyalty podcast, and you can leave your comments and your feedback there about this show or any of our shows. And remember, the research consistently shows that the biggest challenges facing some of the most successful companies is somewhat counterintuitive in that these fast-growing companies often hit a point where they realize they're spending an absolute fortune attracting, training, and developing talent, only to have them leave at an alarming rate. If you're sick of investing in your training and your development of your talent, only to have them leave before you get your ROI, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into purpose. Full Monty Leadership, because you can't outsource authenticity. Thank you for sharing the show with everyone you know. Till next time, this is Dov Baron saying, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about the power of suggestion. Every single time you open your mouth, you have impact. You need to be conscious of that. You need to be responsible of that. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach the next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.